Welcome to Shunned, the monthly podcast where we expose the religions that use shunning as a method to coerce and control. These are real stories as told by the person that lived them. Telling these stories takes courage and the strength to be vulnerable. After this week's episode, I encourage you to go to shunnedpodcast.com and leave a message for the person that told their story by commenting on their episode. I've told mine, and it means a lot to hear from people that can relate. Each person will be able to read and respond to your messages of encouragement. And now, let's listen to this month's real-life story of being shunned.
My name is Emily. I'm 33 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I am shunned. I was born in, and as far as I can think back, I would be considered a fourth generation on my mother's side. My father came into the religion as a teenager, so there were no generations on his side. So, and my mom, it may even be farther than that, but I can't talk to any of them to find out. It was just our whole way of life. As a child, I didn't know, anything different. Just from very early on that we, of course, went to the Kingdom Hall, and our friendships were all within our family and within the congregation. So that's all I knew for a really long time. I know when I first went to school, I don't remember anybody actively telling me at that time to be afraid of people outside of our the truth, I guess, but I remember being a very us versus them mentality. They were different than me, and we had something that they didn't. And when I was in elementary school, one of my earliest memories is, of course, that's when you're first exposed to holidays, and standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I remember in kindergarten, I was told by my mother to not stand. So I didn't, and one of the kindergarten aides was very offended that I didn't stand, and I remember her coming and grabbing me by the arm and lifting me up to stand. And, as a 5-year-old, I was so upset because I didn't understand what I had done wrong. I thought that that's what I was supposed to do, and so that from a very early age, you feel different. You feel those eyes on you, and I was always really uncomfortable with it. I never felt like I was doing the right thing. I always felt like I was doing the wrong thing. One of the other things I remember, was when everybody was painting Easter eggs. I wasn't allowed to paint an Easter egg, so I had to paint a lamb, which was still kind of Easter related, but I had a pink lamb that I brought home, and I just remember feeling stupid, why can't I paint an egg, it just didn't make any sense to me, but it was just obviously, and I was the only one in my class. I do have siblings, but of course they're different ages, so I was the only one in my class that had to paint different pictures and different sculptures and, things like that, and I never liked that. My dad was raised in a Catholic home, and he was one of 5 children, and his parents divorced, and he came from a kind of a broken home, and when he experimented with drugs, and he was just looking for something, and when he was 17, he worked at a mechanic shop, and there was a Jehovah's Witness that worked there, and that's how he got introduced to it. And, he actually studied with him, became a witness, met my mom thereafter, and, the rest is history. But as a result of that, with my father having come into it later in life, and he was disfellowshipped later on in life, and I think the tone was always, it's kind of hard to explain. My mom was like hardcore into it, brainwashed. My dad was a little bit more real. So I had this struggle growing up between, like, my dad encouraged me to go to college, encouraged me to play, in the band, encouraged me to do extracurricular activities, whereas my mom was so opposed to it. So I was always very confused. So I think that feels like my general childhood was confused, and I felt like I had to choose which one was correct. I don't think I knew him when he was into it hardcore. I think by the time we came along, there was already a lot of problems that he had with the religion. So, and my mom, was one of those. My dad, I think all he would have wanted out of her was her to say, listen, you're my husband, and we're going to get through this. But it was very much like the minute he started to stray, she was not having it. Which is sad. Now as a married woman, I can see how hard that would be. So there was a lot of, I don't feel like I had a bad childhood. I mean, my dad took care of us. He worked very hard. I don't feel like we ever really wanted for anything, but that emotional, spiritual connections were so far off that it's affected me throughout my life. I did all those things, and I remember going to, out in service as a child, hated it, was always uncomfortable. I always felt like we were kind of used because who can say no to a child? So I always felt uncomfortable going out in service. But as far as, to go back to like it was with my dad and his struggles, we switched congregations 3 times as a child because my dad was always thinking, well, maybe it's these elders that are the problem. So it's like friendships were very hard to come by as a result. I had somewhat of friends, but we never hung out outside of the Kingdom Hall, and so as a result of that, my desire was always to be friends with people in school because I actually saw them more often. So my grandfather, my mother's dad, he was an elder, so we were very involved when it comes to that. Going to the meetings, it was, my dad, he was disfellowshipped when I was 11, so I actually don't remember much prior to that, and I don't know if it's because I blocked it out, but I don't remember a lot prior to that. I do know, though, that was our life. I mean, that's what we did. We didn't do things outside of that. Because of my dad, like I said, he was always kind of on the edge. Like, my sense of humor would be maybe a little bit more inappropriate than it should have been. So, like, I always felt like I was fake when I was around these people. Like, I had to pretend like I was super godly. And deep down inside, I wanted to laugh at things that weren't supposed to be funny. So it's sad, but it's the truth. Like, that's why I feel like I don't know that it was necessarily them. It was me. I never really felt connected. There'd be awkward silences with the kids in the congregation. And it was, for me, my silence was because I'm always like, okay, what can I say next? What should I say next? How can I act like I'm not listening to music that I probably shouldn't be? I was fake. I don't feel like I found flaw with the religion itself until much later in life. I felt like the flaw was in me. Because that's kind of the way I was taught. I never could come out and say to my mom, I feel like I jive better with these people, because she would have had a cow. So it was like I constantly felt like I was wrong. There was something wrong with me. Whether it was Satan or whatever it was me. These people were all doing the right things, and because I didn't fit in, there was something wrong with me. My dad was disfellowshipped at 11, and I remember that night because my mom would not allow us to go to the Kingdom Hall the night that he was announced. And my dad he did go to the Kingdom Hall, like most people don't. And when they announced it, he stood up and had some few choice words, and then he walked himself out of there. So I think my mom knew that there was going to be a scene, so we weren't allowed to go. And I just remember feeling so sad that this had happened to him, and I didn't know which way to go. I didn't know where to put those emotions. So it was like I kind of leaned towards my mom's side and really pursued being baptized, which is ridiculous when I think of it now because I was so young. But I was just over 12 years old when I got baptized. So very soon after that happened, I kind of jumped into it, and it's one of the things I regret the most, which is awful to say, but that was, and I think about it now, and I've never actually really asked my dad because I kind of wonder what he was thinking in that moment. And if I had to guess, he probably was not very happy, but he's also one of those people that he lets you choose what you want to do. He doesn't stand in your way. I believe I did try some pioneering, when I first was, like, baptized and, that kind of stuff. But, of course, I don't feel like... No, I didn't try super hard, at that kind of stuff. I did do it, but again, because it was what was expected of me. As I got to be, my mom moved. We live in Maryland, and my mom moved to New Jersey, which was about 6 hours away, when I was a senior in high school. She moved out, left my dad, and moved in with a family that we had known in the congregation that had since moved over to New Jersey. So I remember feeling I was only a senior. My brother was a sophomore in high school, and I remember feeling sad, of course, that my mom was leaving, but there was this intense relief when she left, because I finally felt like I can be who I want to be. Because my dad at this time was still disfellowship. So I began dating. I had a boyfriend for the first time that, I had liked boys all along, but they were completely hidden, never discussed it. I feel like I was the queen of a double life for a really, really long time. And I hate that, because I wish that I could have stood up and just been, this is who I am, these are the people that I like, but I did not have the confidence. I was not equipped to have the confidence to be that way. So yeah, I got a boyfriend for the first time, and, my mom, it was like our conversations became news, weather, and sports. That was all we talked about. She did not know my thoughts. She did not know the people that I hung out with on a daily basis. She did not know the person that I was. So I would say from the day she moved out, that was the initial first time I stopped being a witness, so to speak. But it's funny because I feel like at the time I thought I had discovered this amazing loophole. If I just walked and kind of faded away, I wouldn't get disfellowshipped, and I could still have my family, but I didn't have to be a witness. And that worked for a really long time. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever until it wasn't anymore. I dated this, it was like my first boyfriend. I dated him through the remainder of my senior year, all through my college years, which was, I did 2 years of college, and then we broke up. And it was a devastating time in my life. And at this point, my mom had become privy to the fact that I had this worldly boyfriend, and we broke up, and she kind of swooped in there, and she asked me to get right by Jehovah and to move with her. And she hit me right at the right time, and I thought, what else do I have to lose? And I thought in my head, I've never actually given it a real shot. Maybe now's the time. So, and it was almost like, see what the world has done to you, see how upset you are. It's because you left Jehovah. This is why these things are happening to you. It wasn't that you're 19, 20 years old, you've just experienced the first heartbreak of your life. It's because you've been doing wrong. You've been sinning all this time. And so I thought, okay. So I had 3 jobs at the time. I quit every single one of them, and I packed up and I moved 6 hours away in with my mother. And we call these 2 years the period of trying, because I really tried. I started in that congregation, and let me tell you, I don't know, I guess you probably have been. The first judicial meeting that I had was because a result of, I had been pretty much out of the religion, not disfellowship, just out for the last couple of years. They wanted to know everything. And let me tell you how uncomfortable it is for a 19, 20-year-old girl to sit in a room with 3 old men trying to ask you exactly what sexual things you have done in the past 2 years in detail. I remember, my mom telling me, to me, I thought, I'll just come up here, I'll start new. Nobody has to know anything. My mom, she won't tell them anything. Well, that was obviously wrong, because she must have told them that I had a boyfriend. She, of course, didn't know details. If she would, that's probably the gist of her knowledge, was that I had one. So I was told, these 3 elders, they want to meet with you, and it was don't worry, you're not going to get disfellowshipped. And, when she first said that, it was almost like that hadn't even crossed my mind, that might happen. And I'm going, okay. And I'm like, well, what do they want to talk about? And she's like, well, they just want to talk to you about anything that's been happening while you've been gone. And I didn't agree with it, but I didn't know. At the time, I didn't have enough strength to say I'm not doing it. So I did it, and I'm sitting there. Now, granted, I had actually known a few of these people. Like I said, my mom moved up there with a family friend. So I had known some of these people. And I'm sitting with one of their fathers. And I'm looking at him, and he's asking me, have you ever had sex? Well, to be honest with you, I had, and I lied. Because I was terrified of telling them that. So I'm like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. They're not gonna believe me if I say we didn't do anything. So I'm gonna just tell them bare minimums and, slide on by, because that's the thing. I wasn't trying to be deceptive. I was scared. They're telling, my mom throwing out the disfellowship word. I'm like, well, that's what's gonna happen if I tell them that. So I'm scared, so I don't. Well, they're asking me, was there any penetration? And I'm looking at them like, this is none of your business. It is absolutely 100% none of your business. But I'm like, yes, very uncomfortable, extremely uncomfortable. That's all they cared about. That's the only thing they asked me, was about this relationship with this boyfriend and how far we went. That's the only thing they wanted to discuss. At the very end of it, then they inform me that, by the grace of God, they're not going to publicly reprove me, but they'll just privately reprove me. And I'm thinking to myself, seriously, you guys honestly feel like there was a possibility that I'm going to show up in this congregation and the first thing that people are going to hear about me is that I'm publicly reproved and or disfellowshipped? So I felt like it's like they were giving me a solid. We're just going to privately reprove you. So that for me, that meant I couldn't go out in service, which I didn't care about. I didn't want to do that anyways. And I couldn't answer at the meetings. Also was fine with that. So I'm thinking to myself, wiping off the old brow. I did this. But there's still that part of me in the back of my head that was like, you weren't completely honest. You probably deserve to be disfellowshipped. So there's always that, that's from a very young age, that feeling of, I've never really been true to who I am, never felt comfortable to be that way as a result of the fear that they instill in you from a very young age. And, as a sidebar, it's funny because I came home from that judicial meeting and there was an elder in there particularly that I said to my mom, this is one of the first times I remember, like, really opening up to her. And I said, I can't put my finger on it. But one of them, I said, I had a bad feeling about him. And she said, well, what do you mean? And she instantly gets defensive because this guy was, him and his wife were a friend of hers. And I'm like, well, I said, I don't know. I said, but there's just something about him that says guilty. And she got very angry at me and was like, he is an outstanding brother and elder. And I'm like, okay, I'm just telling you, my gut tells me something about him isn't right. A few years later, he was removed as an elder for cheating on his wife. And I wanted to say something to her so bad, but I was like, I'm just going to let it go. Because I didn't know that that's what it was. But I just felt like, when somebody, I don't know how to even describe it to this day, when the way he was looking at me, the way he was saying, I felt like he is not any better than I am. So, so that happens to me, and, I'm thinking I got it, I skirted on by here, and, I begin making friendships, and I will say for the first time, being a witness, the friendships that I created when I lived in New Jersey were the most real. There were so many more people available to me than the little town I grew up in, and I did genuinely have so much fun with these people. I felt like they were more diverse. There was more, I don't know if I want to use the word leniency, like, every congregation is different, which is funny, but I felt more able to be myself with them. But what I find funny is one of the people that ended up becoming one of my absolute best friends, as we became closer, we discovered that me and her weren't all that different. And she's been disfellowshipped 3 times. So it's sad because we actually don't speak anymore. Because she kept getting roped back in. And even when she would get disfellowshipped, and I, of course, talked to her like nothing ever happened, she would say, I do love Jehovah. And I would think in my head, do I? Like, I just never felt that. It was just, I always felt like this image of Jehovah was not a loving God. It was someone to be afraid of. It was someone that was condemning me. I always felt guilty. I never felt like I could say I love Jehovah and mean it. So when she would say that to me, I'd be like, that's so weird, because we're so much alike, but yet you have that and I don't have that. It would make me question, again, like now, like that I just said, does anybody really feel it? That's me now as a 33-year-old. At 21 years old, it was, what's wrong with me? Yet again, that was what's wrong with me, because even though I was still doing all the things, I would say the only thing, I look back at those 2 years of my life and I think about the friendships that I created with these people, and the religion stuff's in the background. It still was not, my period of trying, it was still not there. And I will say one of the things I think that was a catalyst for when I started to think, I can't do this anymore, was, remember, my dad, he lives in Maryland. He's still disfellowshipped at the time. And I, of course, still had a relationship with I'm daddy's girl, if you haven't figured that out yet. So still have that. And I had an elder approach me at the meeting with some articles. And he starts to hand them to me, and I don't look at them yet. And he's starting to say about how, when I lived in the home with my dad, having a relationship was understandable because you live in the home. But now that I don't, should I still have a relationship with my father? And I stopped him, and he started to hand me the article, and I put my hand up, and I said, I don't need any of that. And he kind of looked at me, and I said, because there's nothing that you can say that's going to make me stop talking to my dad. And I walked away feeling so, like, empowered to a certain degree, but so mad that somebody had the balls to walk up to me and tell me to not have a relationship with my father. And I mean, and that's why I say, like, even as a child, a disfellowship person would come in the hall. I was the little girl peeking through the chairs, waving at them. Like, I did not understand. And I don't think I even could intellectually describe why I felt that way. It was just something deep inside of me that said, how can you do that to somebody? How can you do? And it was just like, you know, and it's funny because that elder never once said another word to me about it, so which surprises me that I was left alone. I remember sitting in an assembly one time with an older lady, and she said, I heard they're going to make marrying outside of the truth a disfellowshipping offense. And I just looked at her, because I remember I was like 15 at the time. This was right before my mom moved. And I remember thinking, number one, how do you just make something an offense all of a sudden out of nowhere? And number two, I felt so scared because I knew even then that the chances of me marrying a witness were slim to none. I was never, and as of this day, have never officially been disfellowshipped. I probably should have been by their standards, for sure. And speaking out on this, you know, it's kind of funny because I've always said, you know, I've never really, you know, I'm married now, and I'm not doing anything that I should be disfellowshipped for. And then it's like it dawned on me what apostate is. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't think about that, you know? But no, like, I felt like I always kind of skirted it. And so that's why I say that, you know, from when I left New Jersey on, I was never disfellowshipped, but I never walked back into a Kingdom Hall. I think I tried to go to a memorial every once in a while, but like that was really just to please my mom. That was it. You know, I never stepped back in, so I was never really officially shunned at that point. Now, my sister, you know, to give you a little background, I have an older sister who's, you know, 4 years older than me. She has been a witness our whole life. She got married at 19 to another witness, and so, you know, that's her story. My brother is a year and a half younger than me, who's never been baptized. But this is where the interesting things lie that drives me crazy, is that my brother, as a result of never having been baptized, is free to all of my family's love, but I'm not. And he is certainly not, you know, going to the meetings and doing anything by their standards. So my brother actually lives with my mother. It's frustrating to me because there's this level of, it's totally unfair. I mean, he is held to such a different standard because I feel like, I guess in their world, they still have a chance with him. Because he was never baptized, they can still aim for that goal somehow. I love my brother, obviously, but my brother has had addiction problems. As far as I know, he still currently does. And, you know, all of these, he is into music, so he performs in bars every night, you know, working towards this music career that he loves. And, you know, he has a girlfriend who, of course, is worldly, and she's invited into their home, and the only difference is that he wasn't dunked underwater. And the other only difference is, and I feel like, can you sense my anger in this, is that I tried. You know, and that's where a lot of my frustration lies, is I feel like I so tried to do the right thing, well, what they think is the right thing, and I have gotten nothing but punished for it. And it's so hard, you know, to not, I mean, I feel like I love my mother, I do, but the respect I have, I mean, at this point in our lives, I have almost zero respect for her. To fast forward a little bit here, like, you know, so this is, you know, of course my mom lives 6 hours away. I moved home, I'm living with my dad. My brother was still living around here at the time, and I end up, of course, then I get into a relationship that becomes pretty serious. We'd moved in together, and we end up having my first child. Let me tell you how difficult it was. I actually am not even the one that broke the news to my mom, because I was like so scared. But when I found out I was pregnant with him, there was the terrifying feelings of, there's no way I can pretend I don't have a boyfriend anymore, obviously. And that feeling of relief that, okay, now they're gonna know. I don't have to not answer his phone call if I happen to be visiting with them. I don't have to talk about everything but him, because it's going to be so clear that I have a boyfriend. So there was this feeling of relief too. My dad actually was the one who told my mom, and she called me, and I will say I was pleasantly surprised. She called me, she was crying, and she was, I wouldn't say it was like a very sad overtone to the conversation, but she wasn't shaming me for it, which was very surprising, right? I was surprised, but I thought, okay, and the same goes, with my sister. It was kind of the same kind of thing. She already had some kids, so, but, there was really no shaming for it. So I have my child. Both my sister and my mom came and were in the room with me for my first pregnancy, birth and everything. And it was just weird because, like I said, I still have all of these underlying resentments to my mother. So, it was uncomfortable, but she was there, and I won't take that back. About a year later, me and my oldest child's father split up. And this was a very hard time for me because although we weren't ever married, living together and having a child with someone, it felt very much like it. So at this point, my brother has now since moved in with my mom in New Jersey. We break up, and she says, "You can come stay with us." Okay, I think I'll try that. I take my son, I go to New Jersey. I'm there. I felt like I was treated so subpar when I got there. My mom not once asked me how I was feeling. Like I said, this is a pretty devastating time for me in my life. I feel like I'm going through this divorce. I have a 1-year-old who's not with his father right now. We're in this tiny 2-bedroom condo, and I'm on the couch. That's, the room I was given. I was on the couch, and just like I said, I don't know what I expected. I shouldn't have expected anything, but I guess I just kind of felt like this second-class citizen that they took in. And I got into a physical fight with my brother, which is not something that I'm proud of, not a person that I have become a person that I would have never expected as a result of all these feelings that they put on you. And my mom, I remember my brother and we were like in each other's face. I pushed him down to the ground, and my mom screamed and told me she was going to call the cops on me. And I was just like, I just lost it. I took all the pictures that she had of me in the house. I'm throwing them on the ground, acting extremely dramatic. And I left at like 5 a.m. I drove home and when I went to get my son, she said, "Don't you think he's better off here with me?" And I just was like, all the F words were flying, like so mad, because on top of everything, now I'm not a competent mother, and so I take him, we leave, and like I said, this is a 6-hour drive. I leave at like 5 o'clock in the morning. She never once called me. I'd say 6 months passed before I ever heard from her again to see if I was okay, to see if we made it home, to apologize, to anything. Nothing. Dead silence from her. Anytime that our relationship has gone through these little cycles, the first person to reach out has always been me. And I'm done with that, like I'm done reaching out to somebody that is totally fine with not talking to me, or seeing my child, or any of the above. It's so sad because, when I had got home, child's grandmother, she was like talking to me, on his dad's side, and she's like, I just don't understand. She never even called, even just to make sure that the baby was okay. I'm like, no, that's not how she works. That's not, that's how normal people work, and I remember around this period of time in my life, it's so sad to think about, but I remember I asked my father, and I was like, did she like love on me when I was a child? And he just like kind of looked at me and he was like, your mom's changed a lot. And, because it was like, I couldn't fathom. I'm holding my little baby in my arms and I'm thinking, I can't imagine ever doing this to him. So it was like that unconditional love does not exist. With my dad, through all of his struggles and the choices that he's made that I may not agree with, or that have affected me in some way, I feel like I could be in a ditch somewhere and call him and he would say, where are you? I'll get, it's like, but my mom, these basic things, it's just funny. I think about things as we go. Like, I remember when I wanted to go to prom my senior year of high school, or this was my junior year. My dad took me to buy my dress. My dad took me to get my hair done. And the night of prom, my mom threw a Bible at me. I don't know if she thought maybe like through some kind of osmosis it would, think it. But that is so rude, But that's why I say I look back on these, like, I look at these women that have relationships with their mother, and I'm like, I have never in my life had that. Never. And it sucks because it has, like I said, I feel like it affects me so deeply. It affects the way I parent. It affects the way I'm a wife. This idea of conditional love, it changes who you are. Like, it makes you feel like, somebody, they could leave you at the drop of a hat, because if your own mother doesn't love you, who's going to? And it has caused problems, it's caused, struggles in my marriage. And my husband, God bless him, I tell you, he's put through the ringer sometimes, because my insecurities that I have so deep all root from that. And they're still happening. I mean, it's not even like, I can say we've healed in some way. It's still, you're left. How do you heal 100%? You try to deal with it. You try to accept it. You try to reason it out. But there's no reasoning out the insanity, Like, I don't think I ever realized, I don't think I would have called it being shunned back then. I just thought I was a victim of, my mother's hatred towards me. I never really know, because that's why I say, like, it wasn't until recently that I really started to kind of, I knew I didn't want to be a part of the religion. There were things I absolutely didn't agree with, but I still had that fundamental feeling that it was me, that I just don't fit into it, and I'm doing something wrong. It was like, I would often say, I think that what they teach is true. I just can't do it. I would say that a lot. I wasn't any religion. I wasn't out seeking for anything else, because I thought that was the truth. I just couldn't be it. So it was a struggle. I remember, with that boyfriend I had in high school, I remember he invited me to go to his church. He was a Pentecostal church, which I don't know if you know much about them, but they're real big holy rollers, speaking in tongues. And he invited me to come with him on Christmas, and I walked in there and I felt like a lightning bolt was going to hit me. I was so uncomfortable. And it's nothing. Like, the Kingdom Halls have no windows. They're so stuffy. They're, like, you raise your hand to speak, like, I was like, what on earth this is horrible. I thought it was horrible. And it was like, it almost reconfirmed to me that the truth was the truth, because it was so weird and so different. I don't feel like that now, but of course at the time, it was such it was so strange to me, that concept of people, speaking in tongues and all of those types of things. So yeah, I didn't seek any other religion. I was just living my life feeling like a failure. That's really how it felt. It felt like my own mother is ashamed of me, and just to kind of follow, not only was it my mother, my maternal grandparents, and my sister, we all had the same kind of relationship, very strained to a certain degree. We could talk about things, like me and my sister would get along fairly well as long as we weren't talking about anything serious. It was always just, we could laugh about things, joke about things, but we didn't really discuss the religion whatsoever. And that's how we were able to be sisters. We could talk in depth about other things, but not that, and she would might say in passing, oh, I can't, I'm going out in service today. And I'd be like, okay. And it would just be like, we didn't talk about it, but of course I knew she was still witness, so fast forward into my life, I end up with, my now husband, but we got pregnant before we were married. And I'm like, here I am again. I cannot tell my mom. And so once again, my dad broke the news to my mom. Well, this time, no call. She never called me my entire pregnancy. I had the baby, and he was about 6 months old, and I sent her a message and said, don't you want to know your grandson? And she wrote back, of course I do. Somehow she's waiting for me. So mixed messages to me. It's like you've literally just not spoken to me for about 18 months of my life. I've had a child in that amount of time. And not only that, I have another child who was almost 4.5, that you haven't spoken to or asked about in the last 18 months, who you claim to have loved so much. It wasn't like when they shunned me, they shunned them. And so there's that anger inside of me, like, how dare you do this to me, but how dare you do this to them? It got more intense for me the older and then I had children, because I couldn't understand it. It became more of what am I doing wrong too? I was able to say, what is she doing wrong? What is wrong with her? I was able to kind of get there. So, we slowly start this little bit of she comes to visit, she brings the present, she's, Grammy, everybody loves Grammy, and I'm just like dagger eyes, I can't help but feel that way when I'm around her, because it's like, yet again, had I not reached out, would she have said anything? It's like, not really, probably not, so I get married, to which my grandparents on my mother's side, they call me one day and they asked me who was marrying us. And I told them that it was the pastor from my husband's church. That we weren't getting married in a church. I decided to get married at an outside location because I thought, they can come to that, right? Well, my grandparents told me that they could not come if a pastor was marrying us. I freaked out. Lost it. Again, another dramatic, huge, lost it. I call my mother, and I'm telling her, how, I can't believe they're not coming. Well, my mom says, well, I haven't made up my mind yet if I'm coming. Lost it even worse. I don't think I've ever screamed as loud into a phone as I did that day. I was holding it in front of me, screaming into it, so angry. And then it was in the end, my mom and my sister, I actually asked to be in my wedding, and she turned me down. So, fine. But she did come. She came, and my mom did come. And it was all that did was show me that you have choices in this world. And my grandparents, they weren't told that they could not attend. They chose not to. And my mom's explanation, like any other thing with the witnesses, it's bull, she just said something about it's a conscience matter. Oh, okay, so, yeah, should I say she showed up for that moment? Yeah, she did, but, she might as well not have. It's like when you have those moments beforehand where she had to think about it, why even come then? It was so awkward for me, and so, like I said, we're still sliding along with this, fake relationship this whole time, and I get pregnant then with now my third child. Now this time I'm like, listen, I'm married, I can do this, I can tell her myself, I can redeem myself, it was like that feeling of guilt that I never called her and told her myself. So I was like, I'm gonna do this, and I did, and she was happy, and it was like, and I thought, finally I've arrived, like, I might not be a witness, but I'm not living in sin. I'm a good person. I don't do drugs, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I have a good job, I have a family. I'm feeling like she should be so proud of me, but she's not. So I come to find out, I have my daughter. She's not able to come visit until about like a week later. She comes, and it was the worst visit we've ever had. My mom barely spoke to me. She barely paid attention to my daughter. She sat on the couch. It was just so weird, so uncomfortable. And that was the last time I've spoke to her. She left my house that day, and I've never heard from her since. She's not seen a single, as far as I know, has not seen. Now, of course, I have Facebook and Instagram, and you know how it works. Like, you don't have to be friends with people, and they can still see things. So I assume she's probably seen pictures of my children, but there has been zero conversation since she walked out that day. Outside of this dynamic, which is a pretty big dynamic, it's a huge part of who I am, but outside of that, I live a happy life, and that's the part that it's like, I need to stop focusing so hard on what they've done to me. I am, happily married. I have 3 beautiful children. I have a job, and it's like I take all those things for granted because I feel like I'm so flawed in so many ways. Emotionally and spiritually, I feel like I am so far behind. But I was tired of feeling like that, and so it's like I've tried so hard to work on myself and to let that go. But like I said earlier, it's hard to do that when it's still happening. It's like a sense of there's not really closure. I get worried every day. I'm going to get a call that one of my grandparents have passed away, that my mom has passed away, that something has happened, and I won't be able to make things right. But I guess I've decided that I can't. I'm here. If they want to talk to me, I'm a glutton for punishment. I always let them back in. But, nobody's knocking on my door. Trying to explain this to people that haven't lived it is so funny because they just can't fathom it, and I've tried to fathom it in my mind where I've said, okay, Emily, say that this is what you believe. You believe this to your core, and you believe that your children are going to die in Armageddon, and they're not going to come back, and so I'm thinking it. I'm trying to put myself in my mom's position, and I'm thinking, okay, so you think the only thing you can do is cut yourself off completely and hope and pray that they come back. And then it's like, okay, I can kind of see it. But then I'm like, none of us have died yet. We don't really know. With every, we don't know 100% what happens to us when we die. All we know is that we do have right now. And that's where I can't get past. Now, I've been married 3 years, and my husband has a very, strong Christian belief, and I've slowly, I've integrated my way, into his church, and you would probably understand how hard that was at first for me. But I feel like I've gotten there, and, the way I am treated today in that church is miles above the way I would, and it's like, how can they say that? I mean, none of us know 100%. I get that, but how can they claim to have the truth when I truly feel like these people do love me? They do accept me. They don't know, nor do they care about what I've done and the sins. That's not between me and them, and so it's really changed the way that I would have never guessed that I could have said I'm a member of another church when I was younger, and I All those years, I wasn't seeking anything like that, but I really wasn't even seeking it when it happened. It just kind of fell into my lap, and I went with it because I thought, what else do I have to lose? At this point. And I personally do want my children raised with a faith, with a belief, and they still don't even understand. My youngest has no idea who her grandparents are on my mom's side, and my middle one I don't think does either, and my oldest one, it's like he never really knew her that well anyway. So it's sad because the questions are going to come one day, and I don't know quite how to answer it yet. Thankfully they're still young because I've got to figure it out, and it's just a shame they have left me with little tools, to navigate this world, and I feel angry for that. I've now begun to try to heal as a result of not having any conversations with any of them. I'm upset. I wish that it was different, but I'm not, it's not there all the time. Anytime I have a conversation with one of them, it was always strained. It was a reminder that we're not normal. Like I said, I found it very interesting when I saw that video of the shunning. I wasn't surprised, but it's just like, how can they not know that what is supposed to be the truth doesn't have new light? Doesn't change. I don't get it. I just want to raise my family, and I want them to know how much they are loved, no matter who they are. They're free to be whoever they want to be, and to me that's a beautiful thing, because I was never given that. Me and my husband are working hard to be able to take vacations with our children, and we just want to live life to the fullest, and I want to live my life not afraid of everything that's going to happen, and I wish that my family could be a part of that, and maybe they will be one day, but if they are expecting me to be so miserable that I come back, that's not what's happening here, so I'm getting to a good place, as a result of many years of contemplating what has happened, which is good. I would have never expected that years ago.
Thank you for listening. Again, feel free to leave a comment to today's guest at shunnedpodcast.com on the post for this episode. Music is always an important way of marking the journey and often helps us to process feelings that we can't express at the time. So visit the website to see the songs chosen by each guest to represent their personal journey. Speaking of music, all music on this podcast has been performed by Poddington Bear. If you appreciate this podcast, please help others to find it by leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, which helps the show rank and get exposure. If you are shunned and want to tell your story, email me through the contact form on the website. Or, if you just want to say hi, feel free to do the same. If you'd like to know more about me and the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses, I encourage you to listen to my 9-part series on the cult at thisjwlife.com or on the podcast called This JW Life. Remember that those around you may be going through something like this and that you have no knowledge of. So give them the benefit of the doubt. Love others, do no harm, and go be happy.